Welcome, everybody, to Beyond the Model, Week 12 edition, NFL DFS picks, lineup advice, GPP strategy for DraftKings, FanDuel, maybe even some Yahoo around there. It is the Week 12. I'm your host, Moose, at CFB_Moose on Twitter is where you can find me. I'm the data guru and co-founder here at OccupyFantasy.com. Alongside Brian, at BrianJesterFF on Twitter, co-founder and CEO of OccupyFantasy.com. Brian, how's it going?
What's up, Moose? Had some Thanksgiving leftovers this morning and feeling a little full now, coming off a Friday showdown video. So the scheduling's certainly weird. I mean, I know we're doing this a little early, but glad to be back and glad to talk some football with you.
Absolutely, yes. Thanksgiving, everyone goes around and say what they're thankful for. Do also have to say, thankful for the viewers, the commenters, the people who like, subscribe, or if you're just watching, we all always have to thank you all as well, because without you all, we wouldn't be able to do these videos. So thank you. What the show is, Beyond the Model, we do have the Occupy model up on our website. We just kind of try and digest it, take a little bit further, talk about some stacks that we like. We answer your questions as well. So if you have questions about this week's slate, go ahead and ask. The only thing we ask, if you're asking about like a specific player or something like that, throw in if it's season long, if it's DFS, betting, etc., and what type of contest you're playing, so we can give you the best possible answer. So, Brian, the first thing that is always interesting about these type of slates is Thanksgiving's one of the rare slates where we have 3 and now 4 with Black Friday games on non-main slates, so it's almost like one of those heavy bye weeks. Does that change anything at all high level on less number of teams?
Yeah, now we're down to just 10 games on the main slate, which generally means we're looking to stack them more often than not. If there's 2 players that you're close between, definitely lean towards a stack. And even if it's not that close, I think you want to lean more towards 3-1 stacks in the largest contest, maybe 3-2 stacks in the smaller contest. And this week, I think there's a lot of alignment between the model, our personal stack rankings, Chris's personal stack rankings. There's a lot of alignment here, so I think there's certainly opportunities to game stack without feeling like it's too forced.
Yeah, absolutely. And, we've been hinting at it some, especially in the smaller contests, the 100-player leagues. Maybe even go a little bit more extreme, 4-1, in some cases 4-2. Not sure if we can get that there this week, but hey, we'll go ahead and try. So we normally like to talk about different stacks. Brian, you and I both talk about our stack rankings before the show. Before we jump into that, I do see we have a couple questions. David is in the chat, says, at work, haven't had a chance to read the plug, but I wanted to know your guys' thoughts on a KC Las Vegas stack. Mahomes may be low owned. Any thoughts on that game, Brian?
Yeah, if we look at our projected ownership right now, we're still waiting on one more ownership update for all the inactive news. We'll probably do that around 4 p.m. or so. But yeah, we have Mahomes at 9% projected ownership on DraftKings, and he'll hover in that range, 9 to 11%, I imagine, which is certainly in that next tier below the top owned guys: Jalen Hurts, Gardner Minshew, Trevor Lawrence, Josh Allen. So he won't be super low owned, but you will get an ownership discount on him. The biggest reason I like that stack, Moose, is Max Crosby, who next games when he plays never misses a snap. He is doubtful to play. So a defense that already isn't great, going to be missing a star player. That's certainly, while it won't help Kansas City's receivers catch passes, it will certainly give Mahomes more time to throw and more time for that offense to operate.
Yeah, absolutely. I think in the plug, I'm trying to pull up here. Yeah, there's definitely talks of that game as well. Just from the Kansas City side is the official recommendation. Put some bringbacks there. But yeah, so great question there, David. Evol says, hope you all had a wonderful Thanksgiving. I'm all in on Diggs and Allen this week. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, so the Eagles, obviously, if you look at traditional fantasy points allowed to per position, haven't been great against opposing receivers. But they've dealt with, I don't think that ranking is truly reflective of their actual talent. They've dealt with some injuries. They just brought Kevin Byard back, or not back, but in via trade. So I think historically they're going to look better. But either way, that is one of the top ranking stacks on the board this week.
Yeah. Okay.
And ownership agrees. So I don't think it'll be a secret, but those are our 2 guys and a stack that we do like.
Absolutely, yeah. So absolutely love all those plays. Those are in the plug as well, that you can check out at OccupyFantasy.com. com. Any more questions, go ahead and bring them on here. Normally here for about 30 minutes, but let's talk about some of the stacks that may or may not even be in the plug. So, Brian, I'll kick it off to you to talk about one of your favorite stacks.
All right, one of my favorite stacks for sure this week, and I think you would. I have two that rank right back to back in the same tier. I think there's these two in the same tier, and then there's another tier below that. I'll start because I am just known for playing Kyler Murray every single time he's available to play. So it would be an honor to recommend his stack once again, and that's the Rams in Arizona. By far the top ranking stack for me, and I'm looking in the plug, and Chris does recommend this as well. Let me double check that really quickly. But stacks, yes, he does recommend that. He just recommends the Arizona side, which I certainly understand.
Mm-hmm.
But we have a lot of injuries to digest in this game. So let me talk through the injuries on both sides of the ball and how it affects how we're going to stack this game and how we're going to play pieces from this game, even if we don't stack this game environment. So first of all, the Rams are activating Kyren Williams from injured reserve. They moved Darrell Henderson they cut him and brought him back on the practice squad. They expect full workload for Kyren Williams. There have been some talks of them wanting to limit the snaps for Kyren Williams. And if you remember, they thought about that earlier, right? In the years like week 2, week 3, is like we can't give this dude 95% of the snaps, and they went out and gave him 97% of the snaps the very next week. Let me read you exactly what Sean McVay said. This was the exact quote. They asked him about Williams' workload, plan to take some snaps off his plate in his return. He said, "I think we want to be able to give him a good workload, but I think that is something we had previously identified. It was unfortunate that he got hurt, but you do want to be cognizant of that it's a lot of snaps, especially with what the position entails and the physical nature at which he plays, some of the things that we're asking of him. Exactly what that balance looks like, you want to be able to ride the hot hand. You want to make sure that you're able to get him in the flow of the game, but 95% is something that we definitely want to be mindful of, taking some snaps off of him." So the way I read that, and Moose, what do you think? I think they're saying, okay, we can't give him every single snap, but we still want to give him a ton of work. Just maybe give him a breather here and there, because he's still saying we like what he does. We want to let him get hot. Like, they're not going to take a ton of snaps off him, I don't think.
Yeah, reading that quote, I'm thinking between like 80, 90%. I mean, the fact that we're looking at the model here, and he is ranked second in our running back model with not as many projected weighted opportunities as he is normally accustomed to, and especially at a handful of percentage of what he is, like his projected ownership, I imagine that will rise some. But if he stays at like less than 5%, it seems like an automatic play for me.
Yeah, I don't think he will, right? This seems very similar to the Devon Achane ownership last week, where I was like, if he's going to be 1%, that's crazy. And then he ended up being like 10% in most contests. I have a feeling that will be the case once he's officially activated from injured reserve. We get the IR tag off him, all those things. Mm-hmm. But if you look at it, I mean, Arizona just already a terrible run defense. Now they're starting nose tackle, starting defensive end, and starting inside linebacker in their signal caller. Fotu, Strong, and White, respectively. So a team that's already bad on defense is losing 3 of their core front 7 pieces. Just more reasons to load up on Kyren Williams. Now, if we look at other injuries, Cooper Kupp, remember, got hurt last week, ankle. Everyone was scared. He's not even on the injury report. He's going to play. He'll be fine. On the Rams side, their slot corner, Lake, is out. And that gives a boost to Rondale Moore, Trey McBride. And then you look at the Arizona wide receiver situation. Arizona is missing Michael Wilson once again. When he missed last week, we saw Greg Dortch play run the same amount of routes as Rondale Moore, right behind Marquise Brown. Mm-hmm. Marquise Brown also didn't practice Thursday and Friday. He's very questionable. If he's out, it's just Rondale Moore, it's just Greg Dortch, and then they'll bring in Zach Pascal more than likely. So, and then just to top it off, one more injury. Arizona's starting corner is out. So they're missing 4 of their 11 defensive starters from last week, and he's an outside corner, so that probably Puka Nacua a little more. All this, Moose, is a very long way of saying that due to the injuries on both sides, due to this likely game environment, I know it is the second divisional matchup. We'd like to avoid those, but there's too many injuries to avoid here, and there's so many guys in good spots that are underpriced.
Yeah, so many good spots, and also some are way overowned. I mean, you're looking at like Puka and Kupp, they're going to be like 15, 20%, sometimes higher in some contests. But then if you're talking about like Greg Dortch, maybe you go Rondale Moore, and they're going to be less than 5%. It kind of counteracts that, where you're going to have to find 1 or 2 low-owned pieces for your lineup. And if you can do a low-owned piece with your stack correlation, that's money right there. I do like Trey McBride. I mean, he seems like one of the best tight ends for his price. They just refuse to price him 7-8K like he should be. But I think that you want to sprinkle him in as well.
Yeah, now we get him at 17% projected, and maybe he'll be 20. Maybe remember last week he was like 40. So this entire game is the ownership is a little depressed across the board for what it should be. So I'm all in on this game. Stafford and Kyler, they're in that next tier of ownership, even behind Mahomes. So full speed ahead, was ready to be hurt once again by Kyler and Arizona Stacks.
Yes, us and the bankruptcy judge will be in court. Definitely. So, talking about the next stack, I see some people asking about Houston. We'll get to them in a little bit here. But the next stack, Brian, that you and I kind of have is our top tier stacks. That you see it on your screen here. It's that Tampa Bay and Indianapolis game. Brian, why don't you? I'm curious. I have a couple thoughts here about this game, but what are your thoughts on it?
Yeah, it rates a lot of the metrics that we look at: OF index, cumulative numbers, totals, total move, target concentration. Everything adds up for this game, and they're cheap. That's the other great piece, is that they're cheap. I know Chris recommended just the Indy side in the plug. I like the Tampa Bay side as well. If you look at Tampa Bay, first of all, right, they're missing. We talk about defensive injuries once again. They're in corner team. I mean, stud, Licker, Levante David. Their middle linebacker, Devin White, is extremely questionable. He's going to be a game-time decision at best. Maybe we get news today that he's not even going to play. That's obviously a boost to their offense, to the Indy offense, mostly up the middle and on the outside. So Jonathan Taylor, who already has sky-high ownership, and Michael Pittman. And then you look at Indy, their corner, Juju Brents, remains out. We talked about him a couple of weeks ago. They still haven't really solidified that the number 2 corner spot with him out. That gives a boost to Mike Evans and Chris Godwin. So I think this game has shootout written all over it. Mm-hmm. We've seen Colts be prone to shootouts this year, given their defense. They released Shaq Leonard, who wasn't playing a full-time role, but was still a great defender when he was on the field. So I think all the signs most point to this being fireworks once again.
Yes, fingers crossed. Yeah, again, anytime you can have a lot of injuries and with a high total game, and it opens up a couple more spots for some more concentrated volume, I think you have to at least have that on your radar, and that's one of those games here for Indy and Tampa Bay. Let's see here. Question here from Star-Lord's Dad says, thoughts on Rachaad White with his knee injury this week?
Yeah, so he was not on the injury report, and then we get a report this morning that he was in a late ad with a knee injury, and he's now questionable. We never like to see those. However, I will say, I don't have the exact number here, but it feels like 90% of guys who have been added late to the injury report on Saturday still have ended up playing. There have been a lot of talks of, especially with the recent Joe Burrow developments, right, about teams maybe not being fully transparent about every single injury. And I think some teams are just being cautious and not wanting to be fined or have draft picks taken away. So anytime there's anything at all, they just want to report it. And I think that's the reason why we see this number being so high, people who do play added late on the injury report. So we have no word, right? We don't know when this happened, what the injury is, how he's feeling, why they put him on there. So we truly have no information yet. I would just assume he's going to play, but national reporters have good inside information. We'll probably get a report late tonight. They have a bunch of running backs on their active roster, so I don't think that they would call up anybody off the practice squad. This is is in a good spot tomorrow, and I would just assume, Star-Lord's Dad, that if White is active, that he's going to play his full role, unless we hear otherwise.
Okay, that makes sense to me. And to speak with EGS Comics question, thoughts on the Houston stack this week? Will CJ keep up the pace? Brian, I think so. Looking at my notes here, I mean, just, again, high ranking in the model. Just Tank Dell's going to score a touchdown and 100 yards every week. Just the absolute greatest wide receiver to come out since Puka Nacua. They're not that expensive either. So I'm like, they let you fit in a bunch of other stuff as well. Let me pull up one thing here. That's the wrong team. Yeah, I mean, Tank Dell's going to be like 18-20% on both sites. But also Nico Collins, only 6,400 on DraftKings, 6,900 on FanDuel. A lot cheaper and lower owned option. I mean, I could see this being like a 3-1, maybe 3-2 in small field. Bring it back with Ridley or anybody else. A couple injuries on there as well. But I'm curious what your thoughts are.
Yeah, I agree. And here we go again with injuries. Jacksonville starting corner Campbell is out. Obviously, it's a boost to Nico Collins, Tank Dell. And I'm on the same page as you, Moose. Tank Dell will probably bury us again, but Nico Collins is the perfect pivot at lower ownership, lower price. You can, and again, if you play Stroud, you can play both. His efficiency has been through the roof. Their
Mhm.
offensive system has been fantastic, very quarterback friendly system, and you know that's not a knock on CJ. He's done what he's needed to do. So all this is a way of saying, EGS, that Houston's in another great spot this week. We're going to continue to stack them seemingly every time they're on the field. The one situation we have to look at here is the Houston running back situation. We've been playing Devin Singletary for 3 straight weeks. I was playing Dameon Pierce every single slate before he was injured and Devin Singletary took over. But Pierce is going to return this week. He is officially questionable, but expected to suit up according to Aaron Wilson, who is inside for. And if you read their coach's comments, it was in fact their running back coach's comments. He said that we want to keep both guys fresh. Devin did a great job in Damien's absence, but we're not going to just give Devin the full workload, and we're not going to give Damien the full workload just coming back. It's going to be a committee, and that was the exact quote. It's going to be a committee. So unfortunately, it likely makes both guys unplayable, like it did, the first few weeks of the season. So I know I've seen some people wanting to bet Devin Singletary touchdown props. I see people want to even roster Devin Singletary again, but Pierce is going to be back, and it really muddies that backfield.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely makes sense. I mean, I think even looking at my stack rankings, I might have to actually switch that with Arizona side, but both of those are still great, solid options. I don't know. It seems like we got, like you said, a clear number one tier, and then especially with low owns, goods plays, and then we can sprinkle in some of these other stacks as well. But yeah, Neil says, is Brian on dial-up internet? No, it's because I am house sitting for the holidays, and the internet here is a little spotty. But we take what we get, so hopefully not so bad. Hope it's not too terrible. Yeah, so we're here for about another 15 minutes or so. We will go ahead and answer any more questions that you have. Brian, now that we've gotten the top stacks out of the way, let's get into some of the fancier ones. I'm curious, what are your thoughts on your next stack you want to talk about?
Yeah, there's a couple. I just do want to touch back on Kansas City. I know we had the question from David earlier, and the Kansas City side is a little bit more interesting than it normally is, right? We know even on Showdown we don't even want to play those receivers, right? But Jerick McKinnon is going to be out. 25 snaps last week. That's a massive boost to Isaiah Pacheco. Pacheco should see most of the passing game work now. McKinnon took all of that, even some goal line work when he's been on the field. So Pacheco and even CEH, I'm sure CEH will fill in some, but I think Pacheco, massive boost this week with McKinnon out. And then Hardman is out, and that sneakily adds a handful of snaps and routes to other guys. Justin Watson has led the team in routes the last 2 weeks. Did suffer with some drops on what was it, Monday night or Sunday night? I think it was Monday night.
Yeah.
But he's on our underperforming wide receiver list, despite scoring a touchdown last week, a short touchdown. So Watson at 3K, a guy we typically play in Showdown because he's like $2,500 and 40% owned every single time. He's 3K this week, underperforming wide receiver. I don't think people are going to play him. I'm not sure I'd play him outside the stacks, but Kelsey and then Watson as your Curtis Samuel piece looks like a great 3-0 stack for Kansas City.
Yeah, I mean, if you're playing Watson, I'm curious here. Like, do you play? I know he's not on the underperforming wide receiver list anymore, but if you're saving that salary at the 3K, do you think you bring back Adams? I don't think you can bring back Myers at all. But
Yeah,
good,
I think. I mean, our model's just been so high. Our model's been so high on Devontae Adams, underperforming wide receiver for literally 5 straight weeks, and that's because you have Brian Hoyer and Aiden O'Connell throwing to him. But he is due for just a massive game. Whether this is the opportunity to do it, I don't know. I think you're better off, Moose, just 3-0 stacking. You look at the spread in this game, it is 10 points. That is above the threshold of requiring a bring back generally. Yeah. So I think I would side with the 3-0 route here, or even 2-0. And then if you're building 20 or 150 lineups, then you can consider bringing it back with Devontae or Josh Jacobs.
Okay, that makes sense to me. Got a question here from Sean. He says, as a broader strategy, if you're high on 3 different game stacks, do you sprinkle in all 3? Or commit to one core 3x1 and supplement the one-offs and mini stacks for the other 2?
Yeah, it's a really good question. And you'd be surprised. We get this question pretty frequently. I don't think there's definitely a concrete answer. You'll see some pros play it one way or the other. However, I will say the prevailing strategy, whether it's from what we've seen people do in small field, what has been successful in small field, what has been successful in large field, what we've seen most simulations spit out, and whether it's the readily available simulation tools that are available now for free, or just studying lineups of people that are known simulation players. And what we even recommend in our own content, Sean, is rotating the stacks and evenly distributing. So if you have, especially if you're playing 3 lineups, right? You play 3 different game stacks. You have a core of guys that you mix in and rotate the stacks around those guys, as opposed to just playing 1 stack. The idea being that you can nail your core plays, or if you nail your core plays, and then if one of your 3 game stacks go off, you have a chance to get to the top of the leaderboard in the contest that you're in. So we do see some pros and even some simulation guys go really heavy on 1 game. One that comes to mind is Begressive, went really heavy on a Minnesota game, 1 slate, and won like 500K alone in 1 contest. But those are rare and fewer and far between. Most of the prevailing data tells us that we should be rotating our stacks instead of locking one in.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that makes sense to me, 100%. Yeah, so I'm actually going to talk about a stack now, Brian, that this is where we kind of get that clear drop-off of, at least for me, and it's part of our new meta stack. And what do these new meta stacks mean? We're trying to find these very, very cheap plays, a part of our stacks that help build the correlation that allows you to fit in other studs as well in your lineup. And before you say, oh my god, these are gross, go ahead, whether it's our lineup builder, someone else's lineup builder, or optimizer, or just the DraftKings lobby, and just play around with some of these stacks to see what kind of lineups you get. And if it can tell a story for you, like it does for me, then it's not a terrible play. So the one that I want to talk about, Brian, is that Atlanta-New Orleans game. And it's got a lot of hashtag bad plays, but a lot of hashtag cheap plays as well. I actually like that Atlanta side more. Bijan Robinson got a lot more carries. He's still 6,500, 7,400 on DraftKings and FanDuel respectively. Going to be pretty popular. Expected to get a lot more weighted opportunities. But passing game's kind of concentrated. Drake London is really the only wide receiver we have projected in our model. But there's both Kyle Pitts, Jonathan Smith on tight end. Both of them are cheap at, I think, less than 4K and less than 5K on DraftKings and FanDuel. I think you can 2x1, maybe 2x2 this. Shaheed is always going to be cheap. 4,300 on DraftKings, 5,800 on FanDuel. He's one of those guys that can easily get you a 40 to 60 yard touchdown and hit you at value in just one play. That's all you need. But Olave also can catch the deep ball as well. It's a lot of, I think, explosive plays on both sides at cheap prices. It's definitely a high risk stack. But anytime you can get explosive players at cheap prices to allow you to fit in other studs, I think you do it.
I agree with this. I love it. This is on my list as well. And again, it's not something to go crazy with, but it is a game stack, like Moose said, that you should just try out, right? So they're starting Desmond Ridder at quarterback this week, a little back and forth because Arthur Smith definitely knows what he's doing as a head coach. So Ridder's going to start. He's 4,800 on DraftKings? Super, just incredibly cheap. You pair him with Drake London, which I love. Marshawn Lattimore is out, their top corner. That's obviously a boost for London. Mac Hollins is out, which is another boost for London. Not another shitty player they have to throw the ball to. And while he's not an underperforming wide receiver, we almost have that Bermuda Triangle of opportunity, teammate missing, opposing cornerback out. So we got 2 of the 3. That's not too bad for Drake London. And then you look on New Orleans side, Michael Thomas is on injured reserve. So Olave is going to keep his role, obviously. But if you look at their last game, Michael Thomas only ran 2 routes and then got hurt and was out. But A.T. Perry, the rookie, ran 45 routes, same as Olave, and then Shaheed ran 41. And Perry's 3,200. Shaheed, obviously, I would rather play Shaheed over Perry, but Perry is 2%. So just something to keep in mind if you're mixing and matching for 150 lineups. And again, this is not a game that's going to look great by many metrics, but Ridder plus London and running back with the Saints guy is my preferred way because we've seen Derek Carr get vultured by Taysom Hill. Yeah. And I think I would prefer the 2-0 or 2x1 it, but this is certainly in play.
Yeah, I mean, I'm literally just looking here. If you do just a random, I did a 2x2. I also tried 3x1. It gives you roughly around 7 to 8K per player left, which crazy. After building your stack is pretty crazy.
Yeah, you can play whoever you want after that.
Yeah, exactly. Again, just don't go crazy. Do you think 2x2s on this type of slate for that team could be like we know what type of game both teams play, but if you did, Ridder, London, even if you bring it with Shaheed and Olave or Olave, Kamara, anybody like that, do you think a 2x2 would work here? I know that's one of those rare times it might.
I think so. Yeah, I don't know if I would necessarily allocate 3 wide receiver spots to one game, that's generally not the best way to play a game stack, right? So I would probably, if I did 2-2, it would be Kamara or Taysom, something like that, or one of the receivers in Taysom or Kamara. But either way, I do think it's not a game I would fully stack, but it makes a ton of sense, especially for smaller contests.
Absolutely, yeah, definitely. So that's one of my new meta stacks. Brian, do you have any on your list?
I have the opposite of a new meta stack, and we haven't talked about it yet. It's Buffalo and Philly. It's like literally the opposite because the most expensive stack, and that's part of the reason why it rates so low for me. Now, yes, we have explosive offenses both sides. We have alpha receivers. We have, at least on Buffalo's side, a great moderately priced tight end in Dalton Kincaid. But we have running back rotations. Philly has a non-existent tight end room, non-existent wide receiver threes. Buffalo is Diggs, Davis, and Shakir now. So I think there are a lot of ways that this game can meet the Vegas total expectations, but still completely fail in fantasy, if that makes sense, because there's so many guys playing, so many. And if you look at like the Dallas stack on Thanksgiving, right? Rico Dowdle, Cavante Turpin, like there's so many ways for that type of thing to happen in this Buffalo game that it could fail fantasy-wise, which is for me why it doesn't rank as a full stack.
Yeah, and that's pretty much the same thing for me. I'm trying to pull up the pricing here, but now these days it's very difficult to fully stack an expensive stack like that and have enough salary left over to play, unless you're trying to play like 6 AT parries, but which is kind of hard to do, but it's possible. So maybe you go 2-0, 2x1, etc. Yeah, it's gonna be an interesting challenge, but I do like the stack. I think it's more of a smaller field stack for me. And from
6 AT parries, by the way, is a great horse name.
6 AT parries. That's great. Love it. I'll have to add it to the list we have.
Please do. Moose, I got one more meta stack for you, an actual meta stack.
Okay.
And it is your boys from Tennessee, the Titans. And the reason I say this, this is incredibly gross, but Carolina's defense is without 3 of their 4 starting defensive backs: Jeremy Chin, C.J. Henderson, J.C. Horn. They're also missing one of their top edge rushers, Gross Matos, however you say his name. I mean, just a massive bump to Tennessee, right? They'll probably fail, but I think a Levis Hopkins 2x0, maybe 2x1 with Thielen looks good. That's probably, I think, the extent of this, and it's way down the list. I prefer Atlanta over this stack, but just something to think about.
Yeah, and I would have them on my list, but I have like $1.5 million of Survivor riding on Tennessee, so I would not like to root for any Carolina whatsoever. I just hope they win, 30-0 and call it a day. But it is one of those meta stacks where you can. I think if you play around with it, you can make it fit.
Totally. Anybody else, Moose? I think that about exhausts our stacks, unless there's anything else that. Let me see. I think you and I are on the same page, right? I think we got them all.
I think we're pretty much on the same page. I tried to look before the show, see if there's any way to do any of these other stacks. We talked a lot last week about Dorian Thompson-Robinson with Cleveland. He's just terrible, though. So it's one of those things where it's like you can't be the new meta stack if you actually suck. So I don't like any that game. The New York game sort of popped off, but it's just way too many unknowns. I don't like that. It was one of those things that made me look into it, and then once I looked into it, I was like, yeah, I'm not doing this. Nothing else for me, really. Yeah.
Yeah, it's same exact for me, Moose.
Cool. So to close it off, it's kind of like what EGS Comics question is. What's your guys' dark horse player or players this week? We have the generic fast food play because we still haven't got a sponsorship from a fast food restaurant yet to do this. What does that mean? It is a wide receiver who is cheap and low owned that is going to score a touchdown. And for the sake of this, it is going to be 5K or less on DraftKings, 10% or lower projected ownership on DraftKings as well. And actually, Brian, I think we get a handful of good players this week.
Dude, let's just have a draft here, and we'll see who scores the most fantasy points. We'll each draft 3 receivers from this group.
Okay. I'll let you start.
Oh, thanks. I will go, and we're going 10% or less, right?
Yes.
All right. I will start with Greg Dortch, who I do not think is going to be 0%. That's what we have projected right now. I just don't see how there's any way that happens. I think it's probably closer to 10 or 15, if not even 20% in smaller contests. So technically, both he and probably your next pick, who you love picking in this segment, is probably going to exceed 10%. But for our first draft picks, I'll go Greg Dortch.
Yeah, it's got to be Shaheed for me. I know he's
Yeah.
9%. He's going to be more than 9% on DraftKings, 8% on FanDuel. He's probably 10, 15%, I think. But for the sake of this, that's what we have in the model right now. That's what it's going to be.
All right, so we got Dortch and Shaheed out of the way. Next, I will go. I mean, it's hard for me not to go Drake London here. He just barely meets it at 5K. So I'll go Drake London at 7% projected ownership for all the reasons we've already talked about.
Makes sense to me. And that's tough. We talked about him a little bit here, but I think Justin Watson, 3K, less than 5%, as a part of your stack. It's a great play, but for the sake of this, I'm going to pick him as well.
All right, so we got I got Dortch and Drake London. You have Justin Watson and Rashid Shaheed. Next, I will go. I'm looking here, debating between a couple guys. You know what? Just for the lulls, I'll go A.T. Perry. Wouldn't include him in small field, but I would include him in my 150 set. A.T. Perry, $3,200, 2% owned. So I'll say A.T. Perry. Preseason legend, by the way.
Yeah, absolutely. You took my game stack. You took my stack out from there. So I'm going to go. I'm going to go the other way from you. I'm going to go Rondale Moore. I hope that he steals some targets from your guy.
I just don't understand. I put this in our staff chat this morning, right? He was like 40% owned in some contest last week. Now we got him projected for 1%. What changed, right?
Yeah.
Like, this is still, it might even be a better opportunity for him with the Rams starting slot corner out. So the ownership difference makes no sense, but because he's going to be less than 5%, that means he's going to score 4 points.
100%, yeah. Cool. So before we go ahead and take off, we have one last question. I'll take us out of here. From Sean, he says, Jags almost have too many weapons at this point. I feel like one of them is going to score 30 points, but I can't decide who. Kirk, Ridley, both over 10, 15%. Over on the wide receiver side, what's his name? Trevor Lawrence can just run for 2 touchdowns again, score 30 points himself that way. ETN can get there too. He's also double-digit ownership, so pretty highly owned team. But I'm curious what your thoughts there. Anybody that can break the 30 point this week.
So I will also mention Evan Ingram, who's 4th in our model. I believe that's the highest he's been all season. So keep an eye on Evan Ingram as well. But if we're looking for the tiebreaker of which Jacksonville player to play, it's going to be Christian Kirk. He is on our underperforming wide receiver list. Calvin Ridley was on it last week and exploded. Now it's Christian Kirk's turn. So I'll go Christian Kirk for Sean's question of which Jacksonville player explodes.
Yep. And then Evol says Derrick Henry is due. Yep, I would love that if Derrick Henry is due. This could be
the game. This could be the Derrick Henry game.
Yep. Actually, and then last question from EGS: what size stacks do you guys recommend if you're putting in 5-6 lineups for high risk? I'll let you elaborate, Brian. But normally for me, if it's in the smaller high risk contests, 100-player leagues, stuff like that. I'm usually doing like 2-1s, maybe 3-1s, sometimes 3x2 if it's like a very concentrated game and very low. But for the like milli makers or the play actions, I usually kind of cap it at 2x1. Sometimes I'll do 2x0 as well. Curious to get your thoughts.
Yeah, I think it depends on the size of the contest, depends on the games that you're stacking. 3-1 is the default, and then move that up or down depending on the contest size. And also just read our free strategy guide, EGS, if you haven't already, the NFL strategy guide on our site. I don't know if the link's in the description, but if you go to our site and just click the guides at the top and then click the NFL strategy guide, there's a whole section on stacking, when and how to stack different stack types, and that should help you guide your decisions.
Yeah, absolutely. So that'll do it for the show. Again, if you like what you saw, go ahead and hit that thumbs up. If you want to see more videos like this, go ahead and subscribe. We got our NBA guys doing it every single slate, live Q&A over here on YouTube, as well as our Discord, occupyfantasy.com/Discord. Figure out how to gain access to that. Chris is going live in the Discord tomorrow sometime. So go ahead and check out the live Q&A there. Anything else that I missed?
Yeah, Chris posted his video this morning on our YouTube channel, so make sure you go check that out. He has all the actual core plays that you want to. Moose and I have talked about stacking backs. And we mentioned briefly, rotate around a core, rotate around a core, rotate around a core. Go watch Chris's video and read our daily plug for who those core guys are, because Chris is really locked in on actually picking out the best plays every single week. So make sure you go watch the video, read the plug for that.
Absolutely. And we do have the Occupy Fantasy members contest. That's check it out in the daily plug. Go ahead and check that out as well. Free contest we do every week. But that'll do it for today's show. Moose and Brian from Occupy Fantasy. Good luck. Have a good night.
Good luck.